So welcome. This is a yin yang class. So we're going to do some yin at the top, which is longer, slower. We're going to get kind of into the hips a lot. And then we'll do a flow sequence that's not specific. It's not necessarily a sun salutation sort of flow, but a flowing sequence. That's technically, that means it's a vinyasa style. So we'll get there. So the first thing we're going to do is start in a reclining butterfly shape. So I am going to make a little bit of support for myself. I'm going to take a blanket and roll it up and put that under my knees. And I'm also going to use a pillow under my back to sort of elevate my chest and give me a little chest opener, a little shoulder opener. And so if you have some pillows, you can, or a big thick blanket you can roll up. That will make a really good support for your back. Or you can use 2 yoga blocks if you have those at your house. So 1 yoga block under your shoulder blades and 1 to support your head would make it just right. Okay. So my back is going to go down the length of this. My head will be supported. And where this ends will be somewhere like right around the bottom of my rib cage, if that helps you. And the firmer the object, the more, the higher up my back I prefer it to end. So if you're using yoga blocks, right under the shoulder blades is going to be the better spot, because then the weight of your body will be distributed on those large bones, comparatively speaking. Something that's a little softer like a blanket or a pillow might be able to come down a little closer to your waist and feel nice. And then we'll just pause. Now we're going to hang out with this pose for about 4 minutes. And while we're here, we're doing 2 things. One is we're relaxing every muscle in the body. So if the pose gets a little too salty, like it feels, there's any numbness or tingling, there's any burning sensations, anything that you think is dangerous or uncomfortable, then adjust your pose. But otherwise, allow the body to relax in the shape. And it might take the first minute to get it just right. And then let yourself completely relax. And then the other thing that I'm going to do while I'm hanging out here is pay attention to my breath. And just center myself in the present moment. So almost always I have stuff on my brain about stuff I want to do later or whatever. Songs stuck in my head from some past listening or etc. So instead I'm going to try to spend at least half of my mental awareness just on being present right here, right now, in this moment. And letting everything else kind of drop away. And if I catch myself thinking about stuff I'm going to do later, I just come back to the breath, come back to this moment, relax my body, and settle back in. about another minute left. So just check in with yourself, and if your mind was off wandering, just bring it on back. All right, so we're gonna take a nice big breath. And then I'm gonna start with my legs. So I'm just gonna straighten them out. And then I'm gonna pause for just a moment. Now you can move right away in a kind of slow, gentle way, or you can just pause and, you know, keep that sort of stillness, but notice the change to your body. And then I'm gonna take this pillow out from underneath me. And we're gonna come back onto our back. So when you are, you know, you've taken out whatever props you may have had, if you were using any props, or you've just given yourself a chance to sort of notice the, I'm trying to think of what the right word is. Signature is the word that's coming to mind, but that probably isn't the right word. But, you know, the kind of residual sensations left behind by the pose. We're going to take this into a twist. Now, we're going to hang out with the twist for about 3 minutes on each side. So for me, it helps to have some support under my legs. So I'm going to go back to that pillow that I had. And I'm going to put that down, and then I'm going to rest my legs on top of that. And you can have your legs just stacked up on top of one another. You could wrap one around the other. You can certainly add more props or less as you see fit. So I just kind of support the bottom leg, so the shin is completely supported, and then it feels comfortable for me to drop that top leg over. And then I want my shoulders to rest on the floor. So I'm going to try to organize it so that both my shoulders are fairly evenly weighted. And maybe that arm extends, or maybe it's like a cactus, or like the Statue of Liberty, or maybe more like a wing, right? A little lower or at shoulder height. So you can sort of experiment with that. You can also decide, should I turn my head to the right, center it, or turn it to the left? Based on which direction your legs went, one might be more comfortable than another. And then we'll just pause. We'll stay for a few minutes. And if there's anything that feels a little, like I took a blanket and kind of just pressed it up next to my low back so that there's just a little bit of extra support holding my hips in place. And I don't have to do any work with my abdominal muscles to stay stable. So you can check and see, like, are there any muscles that are firing up to hold me here? And am I okay with that, or do I want to make a change? Ultimately, you get to decide. It's your pose. If the top leg starts to feel like it needs more support, you could always put additional support in between your knees. stay for one more minute. Okay, so we're going to take a nice big breath. And then we're going to bring the body back to the center. So I'm going to do the legs rather than roll to my side. But you could roll to your side instead if you want. You just get everything back in the center so that you're symmetrical or even. And then, well, as symmetrical or even as you can be. And then notice, like, are you? So my left arm feels a little longer than my right arm. My left side feels like it's closer to the ground than my right side. It's not. If I put my hand there, I can see that it's not, or feel that it's not, but the internal sensation is that it is. There's a kind of slightly pleasant effervescence to my left hip that I'm not really experiencing on the right just yet. So just notice what sensations are there for you, if any. And I usually wait about a minute or so before I do the other side, so I'm just about ready. I'm gonna give myself a little bit of kind of windshield wipery moves first. And then as I sort of sense that there's a little more ease, I'm gonna let my legs fall over to that side. I've got the pillow in place. And then I'll kind of adjust everything else. Okay, so I encourage you to do similar things. Kind of decide how you want your arm to rest. And it doesn't have to be exactly the same on the other side. Like I like my left arm a little higher usually than I like my right arm. Sometimes I like a little bit of support under my wrist on the right side. So you can experiment with a little bit of, support in other places other than just the legs or the hips. And then we'll pause and then stay a while. I just noticed that I don't know exactly how to describe it, but just kind of gripping slightly, like hugging my hips together slightly. So just letting that relax. And again, even once you get your pose set up, sometimes you'll find that your muscles will contract and do things without your knowledge or permission for that matter. Sometimes that means I need to add more support, so I'm checking in to see if it's just habitual or if I need to add a little extra support under this thigh. And then we'll stay for another minute or so. So we're gonna take a nice big breath. And again, I'm gonna kind of lead with my legs and come on. Oh wait, I gotta take this blanket out. Oh, lead with my legs and come on back. Oh. All right, so we're gonna come to a kneeling position, but you might want to take your time getting there. If you need a little extra time just to pause, take that. We're gonna do a little sequence of 3 poses on one side, 3 poses on the other side for about 3 minutes each. So when you get to your kneeling position, if you get there before I get there, you can do some cat shapes. Those are lovely. A little child's pose, whatever you think would be nice. So I'm gonna grab a couple yoga blocks. You may or may not have anything like that, but if you've got some furniture nearby or pillows, you can probably manage with whatever you got. A water bottle even can be a great prop. All right, so you're gonna pick a leg. I'm gonna start with my right leg forward. And we're gonna start with a lunge. Now, your lunge can have all kinds of elements to it. So you can have your torso upright. You can twist. You could reach back and grab that foot. If you have like some potentially like a little too weighty on the kneecap, one thing that is an option is to tuck the toes under. Sometimes that helps. The other option would be to support your shin. So if you took a folded blanket and put it underneath the shin so that the kneecap is just on the edge of the blanket, sometimes that's enough to support the shin bone, and so the kneecap doesn't have all the weight on it. And then for me, I like to have my hands kind of resting on blocks and my torso sort of lined up a little closer with my thigh generally to start. And I might go lower than that after a bit, but we'll see. So just set it up so that it's comfortable for you. We're gonna stay a while. You can have both hands on the inside as well if that's better. Or just one arm can rest on your thigh. You're just gonna breathe. And I'm just making sure that I'm not being too pushy yet. I've got plenty of time in this pose. So there's no reason for me to be to apply too much pressure to the front of my left hip. Trying to find just the right amount so that I feel my body relax into the shape. Stay for 1 more minute. We're gonna take a couple more breaths here, but we're gonna settle ourselves into what's called a half saddle, which is sort of like the hero pose, but only one leg is folded around or underneath the hips. So some people can sit straight back and their hip will just rest beside their heel. But if that's tricky, then you may wanna do what I'm gonna do, which is to fill up the space here. So I've got a pillow and I'm going to sit back onto this pillow. And then I'm also going to support my shin. So I'll take my blanket and put that underneath. Pillow's wobbly. Okay, that way, when I bring my leg forward, I've got support under my shin so the top of my ankle doesn't feel too sharp. And I've got support under my hip on the opposite side so that I'm not causing too much of a shift in the hip socket here. Now, you can do this pose lying all the way onto your back. And if you're like me and your heel doesn't come up here close to your hip, you might want to lean a little to the side. So you're going to line your hip joint up with your knee joint there. Now I'm just going to lean back and make that tiny adjustment so that my knee joint and my hip joint are lined up together. And the feeling of this pose is just pressure or stretch right there on the top of the thigh, but no trouble for my knee or ankle. If this pose is problematic all around, you can substitute it for taking the leg like that and then folding forward instead. So you can bring the leg around the other direction. So again, we'll stay for a few more minutes. The longer I stay, the nicer this pose gets. But if that's not the case for you and you're finding that this pose is too intense, then you can sit up a little bit more instead of leaning back. Last minute here, or last part of a minute anyway. Now in a moment, we're going to take this pose into the swan. So this leg that's straight, in my case, my right leg, is going to become the bent leg, and I'm going to shift my weight forward into this leg. Now you might know this pose as the pigeon pose. It has similar setup. We just approach the pose a little differently, a little more relaxed. So we're going to pause here for about 3 more breaths and then we'll transition. I'm going to come up to sitting, bend this front leg, and I'm going to straighten this back leg out. Now I've got this pillow underneath my hip, and I don't need it to be quite so far under there. I'm going to keep using it, but I'm going to bring it just a little farther back. Now you can do your swan in an upright position. That's more of a back bend. You can go sort of halfway where you lower down part of the way, or you can lay all the way down. The back leg can be all the way out straight, or you can take that back leg, kind of bend it out to the side a little bit. So again, with the yin, there's some slightly different rules. So as long as it doesn't hurt you, we're in good shape. But make sure. And we'll stay here for a few minutes. nice, deep, smooth breaths. We've got 1 minute left here, y'all. Okay, so we're gonna take a nice big breath. We're gonna lean into the back, the bent leg hip, and bring the back leg around. Make sure we're not gonna squish anybody. And then we'll just pause for a moment before we do the other side. So you just might notice, like, is there a difference between one leg and the other? You can certainly do some movement here. You can go back to the little cat shapes or lie down even and do no movement. So again, it's really just about we're giving ourselves a chance to be mindful. We're giving the body a chance to sort of release the last pose completely, and then we'll do the other side. So I'm going to get my props kind of prepped here, and then we'll come into the lunge. Now I'm gonna, of course, I did my right leg last time forward, so the left one's gonna be this one. All right. Now you may find that one side's easier than the other, one side needs more support than the other. Don't be afraid to, you know, we're asymmetrical. So we can honor that and also use props in an asymmetrical fashion. So my right side's a little more sensitive, so I'm gonna stay a little higher up to start with, just so I can find the right kind of amount of sensation there on the front of my right hip. And it's possible that I will wind up with my hands down closer to the floor, but for now, starting up here. And we'll stay for a couple minutes. Again, you can, of course, add the twist. You can hold onto your foot. You can lower down so that your elbows rest on the floor. There's lots of ways to kind of tweak this pose to make it your own. We're inside of our last minute here. like to keep track and make sure like I'm not tightening up around my mouth. I'm not doing other little tightening up places that I'm slightly unaware of. Do about 3 more breaths and then we'll transition. All right, so I'm gonna just send my hips back to start with. I know I'm gonna want this blanket in a moment. And then you might be just sitting right straight down. Of course, I used this pillow last time and I'm gonna do it again. Now, one thing, just a little caveat about using blankets is that if they don't cooperate, go ahead and take the time to get them straight. There's a wrinkle in the blanket underneath your shin bone. It's not going to be pleasant. So take the time you need to get your blanket all smoothed out. And then so my hips are elevated. I've got this shin elevated. I'm gonna slightly turn just a little bit so my hip and my knee stay lined up. And again, I want to focus that intensity just right on the top of this thigh, not at the knee too much, not too much at the top here. And then we'll just kind of see how things go as we hold pose. This one is even a little more comfortable than usual, which is delightful. We've got 1 minute left here, y'all. All right, so we've got about 3 more breaths or so. Take a nice big inhale. And then I'm going to transfer this pose to the swan. So again, just going to take my time, reorganize everything. And you might want props or no props. You might want to even flip this pose upside down on this side, or have that leg bent out to the side a little bit more. So just adjust the pose according to your own needs. We'll let ourselves settle in. like every now and then I just check in, try to catch myself if I start to wander off mentally. Check back in with the breath, make sure the pose is relaxed. I'm not accidentally holding tension somewhere. One of the things I like about these slower practices is they have sort of tuned me into ways that I habitually carry stress in my body, kind of tensing up muscles without needing to. So that's, I think, a helpful, at least for me, it's a helpful exercise to recognize that. So I can maybe recognize it when I'm doing that in other ways, not just in yoga poses. So we've got about 4 more breaths here, yogis. Now I'm going to gently sort of start to transition out of this pose by leaning, bringing my leg around, sliding off the pillow. And again, I'm going to give myself a little bit of time, like a minute or so, to just allow my body to completely release the pose. I'll probably do a little bit of movement along the way, but mostly stillness. And then when you are ready, you can return to some little cat shapes. You can do some downward dog. Essentially from here, we're gonna get ourselves on our feet. And I'm gonna do that with a downward dog and then a forward bend and then a mountain pose for a few moments. So if you wanna follow along with me there, you can. And if you wanna do your own thing for a little bit, you can do that too. So, now, I like to play with downward dog a little bit, kind of move the shoulders around, move the heels around. Move the hips around. So you can play with yours as long as you like. I'm going to walk myself into a wide forward bend, so it's not as wide as a full-on wide angle, but pretty close. Pretty wide. Let me just kind of shift the weight back and forth a little bit so there's not as much weight in my arms or my wrists. But I still have some of that downward dog kind of sensation in my legs. And then I'm going to come all the way up. Oh. Now I'm going to correct my wardrobe malfunctions and tame my mane. And then I'll find my way to a mountain pose. Oh. This is going to be the top of my mat. Now I have a circular mat, so anywhere could be the top. But this is going to be the top for today. So you're going to pick a side. If you've got a rectangular mat, maybe one of the narrow sides would be the better place to begin. And call that the top of your mat. And then whatever is behind you, that's the back of the mat, right on? So as we kind of flow through these little sequences and I say turn your toes towards the front of your mat or towards the back of your mat, those are the landmarks, right on? So we're going to take the toes and point them both sets towards the front of the mat as best you can, even in the feet. So the feet are parallel to each other. Now this is not my normal way to stand. I usually stand with my toes slightly turned out. So automatically I can feel some muscles in my legs that are sort of now a little bit more alert to holding me in this posture. Notice if that's true for you. Maybe you always stand this way and it's pretty calm, pretty easy. Okay. Let the arms and shoulders relax so they don't feel like they're folding forward. They're nicely down your back. And the arms are just resting at your sides. And then get a little taller if it's available without locking out your knees. And we'll stay here for 2 breaths. Just kind of feel this pose. So as we come back to it a couple more times, we'll get some sense of how it might change. All right, so take a nice big breath, reach the arms up, grab your right wrist, stretch to the left. Bring in the weight to the right leg, picking up your left foot, tree. Nice big breath. Pick up your left foot. We're going to step back, warrior 1. So the right leg is going to stay pointing directly forward. The left leg will be at some sense of an angle. We're going to bring the arms up and fold forward, straight over the knee if that's okay. Roll yourself up. If this is a little wobbly, just catch. A little to the diagonal, coming straight down the inner part of the thigh. Roll yourself up. We're going to face the torso, same amount as the hip. Stretch out through that, and we're going to pause right there. Now you can wrap your arms behind your back for a bind, or reach your arms overhead, almost like that downward dog. You can use a block if that's helpful. Oh. Now, we're going to straighten out the front leg a little bit and then come back to the bent knee. You might need to back it off a little. Straighten out the front leg. Come back to a bent knee. 1 more of those. Beautiful. Now bend the knee, and then we're going to swing ourselves around to the long edge of the mat between the 2 landmarks. You can make your feet wider apart if you like. Come up a little bit and fold in. Rinse out any tension from your neck. Come up maybe to a flat back and then fold in. And then 1 more time coming up, we're going to go backwards. So we're turning the left foot towards the back of the mat, turning the right toes in. So now we're in that long shape, that humble warrior, bowing warrior shape. We're going to straighten out the front leg and then bend it back. And straighten out the front leg and bend it back. And straighten out the front leg 1 more time. Bend it back. We're going to roll ourselves up. Oh, nice big tall shape. Turning slightly more to the diagonal, stretching out. Oh, rolling up. Turning straight over that left leg, stretching out. Oh, rolling up. And this is where things get a little bit tricky. We're going to try to step into our tree pose, or pretty close to it. Oh. Hold and steady. Weight on the left leg. Nice big breath. And we're going to put that right foot down, grab the left wrist, stretch over to the right. Oh, come back, nice tall stretch. And then facing fully that back edge of your mat. And if your screen needs to come with you, you can bring it around. Or you can just listen and hope for the best. That's what I would do. If it's wrong, who cares? It's still a yoga pose. Feel your mountain pose. Take a nice big breath, reach your arms overhead. Grab your left wrist, stretch over to the right. Coming back to the center, we're going to pick up the left leg and then reach back, and it's almost going to turn into a warrior 3, but first, like halfway there. Then slowly lower your torso. If you can hold it, great. If you need furniture, the floor, use that. And then we'll step back into a warrior 2 this time. So opening the hip up a bit to the side. Come on back to a reverse warrior. Over to a side angle. Coming back to a reverse warrior. Oh, over to a side angle. 1 more of those, back to a reverse. Over to a side angle. Now we're going to straighten out the front leg and come into triangle pose. Now, I'm gonna add a bind to my triangle pose. So I'm gonna take my top arm, the one that would normally point toward the ceiling, and wrap it behind my back. Some people have long enough arms they can come all the way around and grab the top of their thigh, but I am not one of those people. So mine just goes behind my back. I'm looking down at my big toe. I'm gonna take an inhale and turn my head up toward the ceiling. Exhale, turn back toward the big toe. Same idea, twice more. And then I'm gonna bend that knee, swing myself around to the wide angle forward bend. Oh, I've let the bind go. So I'm just experiencing that right shoulder for what it is. Now you can reach through or out. You can grab your big toes. You can just dangle. You can bend your knees and come into a squat if you want to. It's your pose, 2 breaths. And then we're going to go backwards. Triangle pose to begin with. So I'm turning the right toes towards the front of my mat, adjusting the left so that I'm in that triangle shape with my legs. Nice straight leg, wrapping my bind here. Left arm's going to go behind my back. Opening up to, so I'm kind of rotating my ribs, lengthening out. And then right now my head's turned so that I'm looking at my big toe. And then I'm going to turn and look up. And then down with the breath, right? So 2 more of those. Just my neck's involved also. Feels nice. Then we're gonna bend this front knee, bring it back to warrior 2, reverse warrior, and a side angle, and a reverse warrior, and a side angle, and a reverse warrior, and a side angle. Oh, this does not bode well. Because we're gonna try to go from this warrior 2 back into our warrior 3. Which may or may not actually work out. And then about half the warrior 3, so I'm just going to lift my torso, and then I'm going to bring myself, nice big stretch, grab that left wrist, stretch over to the right, and then back to mountain pose. And notice where you landed. So now we're pointing again at the top of the mat. Nice big breath, reach up, grab your right wrist, little stretch to the left. Inhale, come back. We're gonna fold forward. Okay, inhale up halfway. Now, you're gonna stick your right hand on the floor, some amount, in front of your foot, like so that you're wind up with your arm pretty much under your shoulder when you get lifted. So you can use a block or a water bottle or whatever you might have. The floor also. We're gonna lean in and then pick the left leg up and swing it up for a half moon balance. Or it might fall apart, but we'll do our best. Nice big breath. And then we're gonna step ourselves into our wide angle forward bend. And again, you can stay a little more lifted, you can fold in a little more, you can add movement. I'm gonna add movement to this one. So I'm gonna go a little to the right, a little to the left. And I just adjust my toes so they point the way my knee wants to move. Now you can get your hips way closer to the ground if you want to make this more of a little half squat. You might need your legs a little wider apart for that. Okay, one more to the other side. And back to the center. And then I'm gonna take this pose and we're gonna add a shoulder bind. So I'm gonna wrap my arms behind my back. Now if you can lace your arms together, do that. Or you can use a yoga strap, which is what I'm gonna do. So I'm gonna grab the strap with 2 hands because I have a hard time getting my arms all the way up if my hands are holding onto each other. So you can use a towel or something else so you can get your arms almost up
pointing up at the ceiling. The shoulder blades kind of draw toward each other and into the back, making some room across the back of the neck. 2 more breaths. And then I'm going to let that go. Rinse out my arms. Now this has to step back to my half moon balance. So I'm going to turn towards the back of the mat with my left foot. Right foot's going to follow me as I try to find that half moon balance pose. One more breath. And then I'm going to put this right foot down, find that forward bend, come up halfway, all the way to standing. Grab that right wrist, give it a little stretch over to the left. Oh, or maybe that was the one I did last time. I don't know. I'll do both just in case. And then find your mountain pose. Oh, so we're at the back of the mat. I'm just noticing if things have shifted. Nice big breath. We're going to fold forward, come up halfway. We're going to step back into downward dog, so hands to the mat and step back. And you can stay as long as you want, but if you're up for it, we're going to lower all the way down. Oh. Hands under the shoulders. We'll do some little cobras, broadening out the chest. Roll in the shoulders. Oh, cobra, broaden the chest. Come down, roll your shoulders. Oh, cobra. Oh, come down, roll your shoulders. Oh. And then, my friends, it's time for Shavasana. So we're just gonna roll ourselves over. Now I'm gonna grab that pillow that I had at the beginning and put it under my legs. But if you like, you can just stretch out on your back without any support, right? For me, I have a little extra curve in my low back, so it feels a little too sharp there. So the pillow will allow my pelvis to hang out in a neutral position. So now I don't have that sense that my belly is poking forward and my low back is overarching. And that's kind of what we're looking for. It's just there's a sense that there's ease here in the front of the pelvis, ease in the shoulders. So decide how your arms are going to be adjusted. Oh. Release every muscle, especially the muscles in your face, the front of the chest, the front of the hips. Those areas where things come together, right? Where the legs attach or the arms attach. And the face is different. That has more to do with survival as well. But these are places where the body will tense up in response to stress. So we want to let it all relax so we can really slide into that rest and digest, that parasympathetic nervous system state. So let the eyes get heavy, and if it's a little too bright where you are, you can always put a little pillow or blanket or towel over your eyes to make it darker. Let your jaw relax. I like the teeth to part a little bit and let your lips get really soft and fluffy. Even if you wouldn't normally think about your lips as fluffy, let them feel fluffy. And let your eyes get really kind and soft. And just rest, yogis. yogis, without moving, just notice your breath again. And take a nice deep breath and feel it all the way to your tiptoes. And then you can start to wiggle. I like to do fingers and toes and then stretch them apart and wiggle them again and stretch them apart, and then do a little wrist and ankle. You could do like little flamenco moves or circles, star shapes, whatever you want. And then, oh, a little stretch, a little curled in ball shape. Oh. And then we'll come to a seated position to sign off with each other. Oh. So thank you for joining me live or recorded for today's class. Hopefully it was delightful for you as much as it was for me. Take a nice big breath and a sigh. Namaste, everyone.